Happy Friday! It is just past 10 o'clock, Friday, September 26th. We are officially in week 4 of the season here in the Pats Interference Podcast, part of the silly, seductive, watch out, we'll get you, and scintillating CLNS Media Network. We're going to bring in Brian Barrett of the Off the Pike Podcast on the Ringer Podcast Network in just a second. We have no better guest with the numbers, the hard data on the show than Brian. But first, no six-pack today. We don't even have a 4-minute drill here in the back end of this episode today. There was a scheduling snafu. We will have Hunter Henry next week. And thankfully, I have a good relationship with Hunter. So when he agreed to come on yesterday, and then I had to explain, hey, that's not going to happen. I'm really sorry. He's still going to come on. So that should be a fun interview. Hunter's been on before. He is also on the injury report because you'll notice he got pretty banged up against Pittsburgh when he wasn't busy scoring 2 touchdowns. Good news is he's been a full participant. The only real question marks seem to be Jared Wilson. Look, Jared's probably not even a question mark. He's just not going to play. He's been out with ankle and knee injuries. Rookie left guard, probably going to be replaced by Ben Brown, which obviously is a big matchup, as we'll get to here in a second, with Derek Brown of the Panthers. Otherwise, K'Lavon Chaisson was out Wednesday. Practice is a limited participant Thursday. And Christian Gonzalez, the guy you really want to hear about as they go on about injuries, limited Wednesday and Thursday, but increased his participation this week. And all signs, according to him, Vrabel, any reporter that you talk to, is that he's going to play on Sunday. So finally, we get to put all of this, as Christian Gonzalez put it, narrative behind us and just get to football with the best player on the New England Patriots. Last thing, subscribe to the YouTube channel @_ Andrew Callahan. Leave a review if you're at Apple or Spotify. The more you support us, the more cool stuff we can do, including our Mike Giardi Mondays. We bring you all the stats, all the play calling breakdowns, all the film nuggets, observations, things that you missed watching that game live. And I know we have a fair amount of sickos. We love the sickos who have already rewatched the game by the time we go live on Monday nights. That'll be 8 o'clock. You can tune in with YouTube. We'll be live on X. We'll be in a bunch of different places. So just find us, come hang out, and then we'll answer your questions at the very end. Okay, it is time for me to ask a couple of questions myself to our guy, Brian Barrett. Was on just a month ago. Always making time for us, pal. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Callahan. I'm ready for this game on Sunday. I'm hoping there's not 5 turnovers because I'm predicting that the Patriots are going to go under 5 turnovers in this game. I feel pretty good about that. I'm a little nervous getting ready to watch the Red Sox tonight, of course, to see if they clinch. But I'm excited for Sunday. I will say this about the Patriots this year. Despite 2 really aggravating losses, at least they're interesting, guys. They haven't been interesting in a while, right? It's just been poor performance after poor performance. At least there is interest. At least it's interesting, and at least we have reasons to be mad about what's transpired on the field.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's something we were saying all across the summer. And I remember 2 weeks ago when, they start 0-1 because what else do they do? And everyone's like, oh, my God, it's over. Things are terrible. And I'm like, I think most of the people who are being unreasonable understand they're being unreasonable. But we waited 8+ months and another offseason and turmoil and free agents and the draft and all this hope and things are building up. And now you want to punt now? People haven't, but it's just to say that, look, even when it's painful, and it has been, I gave Mike Vrabel a D+ shot out of my mouth when asked to grade his performance as coach the first 3 weeks because they can't tackle, they take penalties, they turn the ball over, and their special teams stink. I was like, maybe that was harsh. No, it wasn't. But you know what? Even their mistakes, the turnovers, fumbles at the goal line are interesting. So to your point, you're right, as usual. That's why we have you back on today. I just went through a little bit of the week that was, and I know you and I were talking off air about Christian Gonzalez. What was the most interesting thing to you, though, this week before we get to a full Pats Panthers preview?
Yeah, so then I'll do something non-Christian Gonzalez related here. Was what happened on Thursday is we find out that the Patriots are selling a stake of the franchise to private equity, and it's 8%.
Yep.
And I'm not surprised by that because we've already seen this start to happen in the NFL where some of these groups that have owned their team forever, like the Giants, I believe they sold some of the stake to the Koch family, right? Something along those lines. So we've seen this start to happen. We saw the Celtics actually just straight up sell the team. So I'm not surprised by that. What I was sort of surprised by was the reaction here locally of, hey, why didn't you just sell a share of the team to Tom Brady? I just found that so funny because remember the whole thing with Brady when originally he wasn't going to get that piece of the Raiders, or at least the league was pushing back and the other owners were pushing back because he was going to put in such a small amount of money, not for normal people, but for people that were buying into a franchise, right? I think he ends up getting 5%. I think it was something in like the $300 million range that they ended up paying the Raiders for that. But the thing that sort of surprised me about the reaction is, okay, well, Kraft is going to make a good business deal for him and his son. But the other component to this is, can you imagine like Robert Kraft, who wants so much attention? I mean, we've all seen the Apple documentary. I feel like Jonathan Kraft now wants a ton of attention. Mark Davis, he's not his father, right? Like Al Davis was a flamboyant owner. He was out there. He wanted the attention. He's a big time personality. And you don't have that same situation when you look at a situation where Robert Kraft actually wants the attention, right? This is the guy that's been fighting to get into the Hall of Fame with the whole back and forth and some of the quotes that he's given about Jerry Jones. Like if Tom Brady is a minority owner of the Patriots, all the camera shots are going to him. They're not going to Robert and Jonathan anymore. Like Robert calls him his son and he wants him there all the time. I mean, we put him in the Hall of Fame with the Patriots. We have this statue. And I'm sure considering he won 6 Super Bowls, he's going to be back a lot for these anniversary teams. Heck, he's got 6 of them, right? Maybe they'll even have an anniversary team for the undefeated season too, right? So he wants him back. But I don't think, as much as he'd like being around him every day, I don't think him and Jonathan, I don't think they'd want the attention off them.
I think that's part of it. And I give credit to Greg Bedard, who said this when we did TV last night. You know, they always ask Brady to take less for the franchise, but the Krafts wouldn't take less to give the franchise to Brady. Meaning Brady got such a deal with Vegas. Like you remember the first inklings of him wanting to be an owner were years ago. Okay. And he's going to buy a piece of the Raiders. And they put the deal up to the rest of the owners who go, this math does not add up. The Raiders aren't worth this little. You are getting discounts upon discounts. Like this might as well, this piece of the Raiders have been at the bottom of those $5 DVD bins, which may or may not exist somewhere in all these department stores. You have to pay full price for an NFL franchise, which is going to affect the price of our franchises. So fast forward, he gets a piece of the Raiders, but that was not going to happen here. The Krafts, to go back to Greg, you know, we're going to ask, and they got full price. Like this was by giving out 3% to private equity at 6th Street, which already is invested in the Celtics. And his first name's Dean. I can't bother to pronounce his last name, but some principal of some big investment for blah, blah, blah. This guy gets 5%. He's got his hand in Twinkies and PBR beer, apparently.
Yeah.
Cheers to him. He now owns 5% of the Patriots. And by divesting like this, the Krafts have just, like this, picked up between $700 million and $750 million. So setting the Brady stuff aside, the last thing I have on this is I do think there has to be a piece to go back to the Celtics. Again, who first divested to private equity, and more NFL teams are going to do this. Irv Grausbeck wanted to have some estate planning done before his time passes. He's 91. Okay. Robert Kraft is 84. I think there's a very simple part of this that just goes, Jonathan is my successor, but I want to have as much cash and be as liquid as possible. And to settle everything, why not give up a tiny piece of the franchise without relinquishing any kind of power and just become that much richer before I go?
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. And it makes total sense. That is a good counterpoint by Bedard, though. Hey, he took less all these years, so let's sell less to him. But no, you're completely right. You have to, if you're in Kraft's situation, you have to take the best deal in terms of what's in the best interest of the franchise, or in his case, at this point, what's in the best interest of his family, right? I have no issue with the Krafts doing that. I did think that it was so funny, though, like just the amount of people that were pissed he didn't sell the team to Brady. Like, I couldn't believe it. Driving around on Thursday, it was like such a huge talking point. I'm like, really? Like, this is still going on? But I don't know. It is funny seeing Brady when he was in the booth there. It's like, I don't know about this staff you put together, Tom, with Pete Carroll, and I believe his son is the offensive line coach, and their offensive line is terrible. Yet they drafted – I can't believe the Patriots lost that game. But they drafted a running back, 6 overall, who was like this unbelievable prospect. But, like, you kind of need an offensive line for, like – it made sense when Jahmyr Gibbs went to the Lions because it was like, oh, we've already built up the offensive line. Let's put this unbelievable running back in there. And at this point in their rebuild, they didn't have a lot of pieces to fill in. The Raiders situation just seems weird that Pete Carroll's the guy. And, hey, good for Chip Kelly. Take the most money you can possibly get, but I don't know how much of a difference he's making.
Yeah. All right. Enough Raiders, enough Brady. To answer my own question about what was most interesting this week, you know, the Krafts was number one. But just because I've got this, you know, not quite obsession, but real focus on Drake Maye and how he navigates extending plays versus giving up on them, because I just think that space is where the Patriots season is going to be made or broken as we continue to go on. And obviously that's where it was partly broken, right, against the Steelers when he has that fourth quarter fumble, which is not to excuse Ramondre Stevenson or certainly not Pop Douglas, but it's just to say the guy with the ball in his hands in every play has the most power. McDaniel said he doesn't see any extra pressure on Maye or trying to do something different in the fourth quarter. Maye, though, said for a second straight week, hey, I've got to get the ball to Stephon Diggs. And Diggs talked Wednesday and says, I'll just take whatever I get, whatever's on my plate. And it's just something I've got my eye on, because there's just something amiss here. We know Diggs has called for the ball in previous stops. We know he was excellent in those stops. He's been fine here as he recovers from an ACL. And I don't know why Drake feels compelled to do that when there's not been this giant payoff when he's throwing to Diggs. It's been fine. So again, something to keep an eye on. All right, zooming out, let's go to the game. Pats Panthers, what is this game about? Take that question in any direction that you want.
Okay, so I have two. I was going to go with a Vrabel angle, but let me go to the one that's a little bit more spicy. And I feel like this could be a narrative after Sunday, not before Sunday, because I don't think it's getting a lot of attention here locally. And Christian Gonzalez, likely to play and all that. I'm sure you've talked about that on the pod this week. What if Tet McMillan has a big game? So far this season, he has 216 receiving yards. Now it's 3 games in. And I know that Will Campbell had a really tough time last week against Herbig, who really had a nice afternoon against Campbell. Campbell finished 52nd of 64 tackles in PFF pass block grade last week. I think there's been a lot of good, and I think there's been some bad. And then ESPN had the number that how great Membu's been in pass block win rate. And he's 8th behind like some of the best tackles in the NFL, behind guys like Dawkins, Bowles, Sewell, Alt, right? Campbell in that metric is 59th of 66 tackles. Now, I'm not saying that this is just a complete whiff, because I think for the most part, Campbell's been pretty good, except a rough afternoon against the Steelers. And obviously, unfortunately, had the penalty against the Raiders, but it's not like that wasn't a physical thing. But I do wonder if we look back and we say, okay, are we sure he's going to be better than Membu, who Membu was the more like he fit the profile a little bit more. There's Tet McMillan, who's going to be on the field against him on Sunday.
I'll tell you, I referenced it twice already, but it's relevant. We almost did this on TV last night, ran out of time on a segment. Like, do you look back and go, should they have done something different? Now, I don't know if I said this pre-draft, but I know I believed it, and I believe it now. I don't think the Patriots were ever taking Tet McMillan. I know he had big fans in parts of the organization, but when you know what Mike Vrabel wants, what Mike Vrabel mandates, what Mike Vrabel demands, the reason Will Campbell was a pick was because A, they needed a left tackle, and B, he checked all of the Vrabel boxes, the biggest one being demeanor, right? And McMillan had these questions about like, does he really care that much? Is he working as hard? He was good, his sophomore year, his, penultimate year in college, whatever that was. And last season was like, I don't really know. That it was never going to fly as Vrabel's first pick. But to your point, the Panthers were not the only team that had interest in this giant freak athlete who's got unbelievable body control and is now far and away their best receiver. And it's not remotely close. Pass catcher, forget receivers. It's just everyone who gets the ball thrown to them. It was the Rams too, who, if we know and should trust any franchise the last 3 years to identify talent and develop it, they wanted to come up all the way from the 20s to get into the top 10 for McMillan. So I think that's fair. To me, this is simpler than this. The Patriots have to assert who they are, right? Like the first 3 weeks, you and I are doing podcasts like, who's going to win? I don't know. The Raiders are about in the same neighborhood. The Dolphins live down your street. The Steelers are there. You're all like in the mix. This is in the mix drive. Okay. The Panthers are down a block or two. They're living in a shanty because they stink. We know who the Panthers are. We don't know who the Patriots are. They're 1-2. They fumble a lot, but are those growing pains, or is this a permanent feature of an offense that is just going to have to deal with this all season? They can't tackle. Is that something that Vrabel's going to be able to tighten the screws over time with his coaching staff, or is this also a feature of a team that just fundamentally isn't very good? We will find out on Sunday a little bit more. This is the most telling game on their season because Carolina is not good. Their offense is terrible. Their defense is fine. Their special teams are good. You need to be able to win this game by a touchdown at least if you want to be the team you believe yourself capable of, because you can't point to any game, not even Miami, right, to say that's who we are. That's what we can build on. It's just been a roller coaster, and I think that's what it is. Anything more on that? Because I got some Carolina stats, and we'll get into the offense versus defense matchup.
Yeah, I just have a random question about that because you bring up Vrabel, and obviously it's been underwhelming. They're 27th in penalties per game, averaging 9 per game. And here's my question to you about that, because I can't figure this out. Vrabel doesn't seem to be upset about that, and he even referenced, like, in the data, it proves out that it's not that big of a deal. Do you know what he's talking about there? Like, is there actual data out there that says, like, hey, getting penalties isn't that bad for you? Because it also, like, it's not just the fact that it's the amount of penalties. It's, hey, guys, how many full starts are you going to get on the season, right? It's those ones that act like, I can understand a pass interference, although, like, obviously the Austin one last week was a killer at the goal line where you're about to force a 4th and goal from the 2, I believe it would have been. So, like, obviously that is just a killer in situational penalty. But the ones that are just sloppy, those are the ones that I would think that would really aggravate Vrabel.
So he's right that the correlation between teams that commit a lot of penalties, and those that lose the most in the NFL is not particularly strong. And the clearest example of this is the Seahawks a number of years ago, where they were committing defensive penalties, and holding, and pass interference all the time because their philosophy was just like, we're going to F you up, and the refs can't call it every time. And so good luck. And they had the talent. Like, granted, that's a very good team that had a wider margin for error. I would argue there's a middle ground to be struck here between, as he called himself on the radio jokingly, I used to be a penalty Nazi. And then I did a deep dive, which means, Stretch probably did the deep dive and found out, like, hey, penalties matter, but they're not worth the time and energy we're spending on them. So let's focus on the things that'll help us overcome them. Explosive plays, protecting the ball better, whatever it might be, things that matter more. And so, when I do my show on Mondays, we go down the same 5 factors, which shout out Bill Connolly, who's at ESPN, longtime college football analytics writer. You would freaking love. Do you know Bill Connolly?
No. Okay, you got to hook me up with him so I get him on my pod.
You got to read him. He's awesome. I don't know him personally, but I was at SB Nation years ago when I first started out, and he was there and just ate up everything. Anyway, 5 factors: turnovers, field position, how well you finish drives, your explosive play rate, and your success rate. I don't do, field position on the pod, but we talk about pressure rate. And so those are the things that matter most. Penalties not among them, obviously. And that's kind of where that comes from. But look, it's still reflective of a sloppy team, right? Like, do you just care? Can you focus? The pre-snap stuff is controllable. If they want to spout all the same cliches about control what you can control and we're going to take care of business. Well, take care of business. Like I said this on Monday, like, stop breaking the law, a-hole, is the advice that, like, Jim Carrey gave him liar, and I would give to the Patriots now anyway. Okay, and I think they can do it. I think they will. It's just a matter of time. But they're running out of it because teams declare who they are by late October. Carolina, 1-2. They are 21st by DVOA. They are 30th in offense, 15th on defense, 7th on special teams. Their last and only 3 games. 30-0 win versus Atlanta at home last week. Before that, they lost 27-22 at Arizona in their opener, 26-10 loss at Jacksonville. The Patriots, for reference, we know all the scores in all the games, 27th by DVOA. So this is a bottom 6 team in the league. 17th in offense, 28th on defense, which I think is accurate, and 27th on special teams. Starting with the Patriots offense versus the Panthers defense, where are their big problems here that if you're Josh McDaniels on Tuesday building a game plan, you go, we have to solve this?
Yeah, so the thing about it to me is I feel like this is more about the Patriots than anything the Panthers have defensively. Like, even though they won 30-0 last week, as you mentioned, against Atlanta, the Panthers defense has 1 sack, the fewest in the league, obviously. They have 8 pressures, the fewest in the league. Their pressure percentage is 7.5%, last by a wide margin. They do have 4 picks, but 2 of them were against Penix last week. So you look at Drake Maye right now, he's 5th in passing yards. He's 9th in passer rating, but he's tied for 28th in air yards per attempt, which I'm like, all right, well, look at the situation. Now they have a good corner in Horn, but look at the situation you have where this is a game where you could be able to throw the ball down the field a little bit more because you would think that the quarterback would have a little bit more time. And the other big thing to me, so that's the first thing. I want to see some more explosive plays out of the Patriots offense. And what you were alluding to earlier with Diggs, I would just play him more. Like, at this point, maybe Drake saying, let's get Douglas out of the slot and let's just put Diggs in there. I mean, maybe that's an easy way with an aging receiver. Maybe throw him in there. I would like to see more Diggs because I'm just done with Douglas. I mean, what I'm trying to figure out, like the office space, what do you exactly do around here, man? You can't even pick up a first down when you're basically at the marker. So that's the first thing, is I want to see more explosive plays, which I think the Patriots can do. And then secondarily, I would just like to see more TreVeyon Henderson in this game, because isn't this the perfect scenario to sort of set him up where you look at it on the season? It's been underwhelming, right? 3.4 yards per attempt. Last week, he was actually last in the NFL in next gen stat, the rushing yards over expected at minus 32.
Well, let's part of that out there, because it's such a good point. And I found this watching the film. You go, okay, well, why is he getting, did you say minus 32?
Yeah.
So he was supposed to get 32 more yards than he did.
Yes.
Okay, not 3.
In one game.
In one game. Okay. So you go, next gen stats, F you. How does that make sense? You anti-TreVeyon Henderson bias? No. He is not running with any patience whatsoever. This is fixable. But if you go back and look at the clips, I tweeted one of these on Mondays. I'm going through all the film. There's a crack toss to the left in the second half, and Will Campbell screaming around the corner like you saw in the preseason. Everyone goes, oh my God, I can see it. Some people even call Will Campbell a weapon. I'm like, okay, he's a 21-year-old tackle. But he only gets 2 yards in that play. And part of it is because Will Campbell did not do what we saw in the preseason, and that is smack the hell out of a corner. And Mike Vrabel goes after Will Campbell and says, you got to get into the block faster. You can see him on the sideline. What has to be slower, though, is TreVeyon Henderson, who instead of waiting for those blocks or just hiding behind the 300-pound guy who's moving to clear room for you, he speeds right into a tackle. And that is the stuff where you talk about, okay, how could it be 32 yards fewer? What are you talking about? That's what I'm talking about. There's a guy who wants it so badly, he just has to read his blocks and take them as they come. He's got all the talent in the world, but there's an element of just kind of understanding time and space and being a little bit more patient.
Yeah, well, and back to the point that I was making, because that's a great point. And I do think, too, and maybe you noticed it being at the game, Callahan, I feel like after Gibson or Ramondre put the ball, obviously, on the ground twice and Gibson once, I feel like there's a couple carries in there where TreVeyon Henderson had both hands on the ball, like just like a regular handoff where he had both hands on the ball.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I think that was the thing. But to your point, like, okay, so you look at this team last week, the Falcons still ran for 131 yards on 23 carries against them. That's 5.7 yards per attempt. Carolina's 30th in yards per carry. They're 24th in rush EPA, and they're 25th in rushing yards. So if there is an opportunity, because I look at it, you should beat the Panthers on talent, which is it's very rare that we're going to say that about the Patriots this season. But my whole idea of explosive plays for Drake Maye in the passing game, can we get TreVeyon Henderson going? Because it felt like prior to the season, with what we saw in the preseason and what you, of course, saw every day at training camp, like, hey, man, this could be a really explosive player for the Patriots. And I know they're concerned about the pass blocking because that's been an issue for him despite like this huge reputation coming out of Ohio State. So I know that's part of it. But because Ramondre and Gibson put the ball on the deck, I think it's justified to give him more carries. And I think this is the perfect opportunity to sort of get him going. And the one other element to this, the explosive stuff. And then I thought you made a good point the other day on Twitter where you were talking about in your film breakdown where early on in the game, it looked like some of the Shanahan-McVay stuff that McDaniels was running. And then it resorted back to like the traditional Josh McDaniels offense. And I do wonder, like, I know you were making this point, if it is more about the personnel, but it does feel like early on in this game, McDaniels has some nice scripted stuff. And then it's like, oh yeah, this is the McDaniels offense we've been used to. So it feels like he's almost like with the new things that he picked up in his year off, it's almost like he's uncomfortable to go back to that after he has like the scripted stuff going.
So my read on this is different. And I was hesitant. I'm not hesitant, but I acknowledge that this is not typically a place that I arrive after 2 games or 3 games, because like you, I'm going, oh, sample size, let's wait. Let's see it develop. This sounds more like a storyline than something substantive. And what that thing was is that Mike Vrabel, I believe, has a lot of influence on how this offense looks. And what he wants is what the offense he ran in Tennessee, which is what Arthur Smith ran and Matt LaFleur. And you see the under center stuff, which doubled against Miami. And granted, this is now almost 2 weeks ago. They doubled their play action rate. They ran more outside zone. So all the Shanahan staples, they're doubled their pre-snap motion. I think there's an element of Mike say, hey, you call the plays, but you're going to work from the menu that I give you. And then when that doesn't work, he has to pivot. And so the change that I referenced there, where you're starting with some Shanahan elements and you go to the McDaniel stuff, was about pressure. And you bring up such a good point, because 1 sack, we cannot say that enough on this podcast. 1 sack for the Panthers through 3 games.
And you won 30-0. Like, how do you not have more sacks when you win 30-0?
0 through the first 2 games. And we all know, or we should know by now, that pressure totals and rates are more important than just your sack totals, right? If you're going to hits and hurries, that's almost just as good as only 1 sack in a game in terms of affecting the quarterback and influencing bad decisions. But Derek Brown is the only defensive lineman that you go, okay, who's the problem? And going against Ben Brown, their backup left guard who should replace Jared Wilson, that's an issue. With the run game, you can run traps, you can run whams, you can go any number of different directions, run away from him, double teams, a lot of duo, whatever you want to do. He's an issue. But because last week, when they pivoted from the Shanahan stuff, because I didn't finish this point, they couldn't block it, right? Herbig was on him. TJ Watt was on Drake Maye, Cameron Hayward. So these long developing pass plays where you're running this deep play action shots, they couldn't block. And you had running backs who couldn't pick up blitzes. McDaniel says, we'll back Maye into the gun. We'll go quick game, and we'll just get the ball out, and we'll negate pressure that way. You should not have to make that change against Carolina. This is the game where you can run what I believe Vrabel wants. You can do what McDaniels has tried to do the last couple of weeks and take these shots because Carolina is vulnerable down the middle of the field, not up the middle with Derek Brown, who does move around the defensive front, or outside with J.C. Horn, who we've taken way too long to get to. But you're right. It's Henderson, and the other guy I look at is Hunter Henry, who had a great game last weekend because Carolina, and it's where I'll take a breath and let you go, is dead last in the league by DVOA at covering tight ends.
Yeah. And Henry's been really good through the first couple of weeks of the season, I think at least. And I know McDaniels has played a ton of that or done a ton of that 12 personnel. I will give him credit for, and you're better at the terminology than me, J.J. Watt was calling it the hide route that they were doing last week where he's in there for a second against T.J. Watt, like acting like he's going to block him. And it's just like a quick half a second. Then he gets out there and he's wide open. So that was good stuff from McDaniels. I just feel like going back to your point about Henry and in general with this offense, I mentioned like more stuff for Diggs as Drake did this week, but I feel like they just got to establish like some sort of a hierarchy in the passing game, right? I know that McDaniels likes to be game to game and all that, but you look at the numbers, Henry's got 22 targets, Diggs has 15, Douglas has 13, Booty has 12. Booty has one fewer target than Douglas, and he has 113 more yards. It just feels strange to me because after week one, when he had 8 targets and he was saying he's not surprised by this. At one point, he was a first-round pick. Look, he's made the most out of these targets, right? In week 2, the one target was a touchdown that he caught, right? So he's getting the most out of these targets. But maybe this is a game, too, where they get DeMario Douglas. You mentioned Henry in the middle of the field, but maybe they get Douglas involved, although who knows? Maybe he sees a lot of J.C. Horn, and that sort of could take him out of the game. It is funny to me, like some of these teams with good corners, like who do you put your best corner on when you're playing the Patriots, right?
Yeah, this was the case. You might have even been on this show. Like I remember years ago, I mean, maybe I said this to you last time, like when Simmons hired you right before he did, some EI show on a Saturday. It was like you, Fitzy, Kyrie Thompson, who's not in media anymore, talking about why it's a good thing the Patriots don't have a number 1 receiver. It's like this is a good segment.
Number 2.
Oh, you guys are so wrong. Like you'd rather have good players. Anyway.
Well, my defense of that, and I was proven to be totally wrong about that, is I thought that Kendrick Bourne could be like a low grade number 1 based on his like advanced numbers the previous year, where it's like I think he had like 20 or 25 fewer targets than Jacoby Myers, and he still had over 800 yards. In that season, he was in the top 10 in yards after the catch per reception. Hey, maybe he'll get it going in San Francisco. I mean, these guys that leave the Patriots, Tyquan Thornton's like apparently the best receiver on the Kansas City Chiefs. Maybe he'll get it going.
You are a brave man to bring up that take that you thought Kendrick Bourne, who's been on the show.
Hey, I admit when I'm wrong.
I know you do, but I don't know how many people remembered that. And now that we'll dissect. Look, I, of course, love the honesty. I want to end here because I tweeted this out yesterday, and I knew the Patriots were seeing a lot of stack boxes. And I forgot the Twitter account. I think it was a 49ers data page, and they had the rate of stack boxes that offenses are seeing right now in the league through week 3, and then the rate of efficiency with the run game. So how good are you, and how often our defense is going, we have to stop the run. The Patriots were all the way in the bottom right. So on the x-axis was how often you're seeing stack boxes. On average, they have 7 guys in the box when they go to line up. And they were the least efficient. They are the least efficient running game by EPA. Part of that has been torpedoed by the fact that the running backs just can't hold on to the ball. Okay, that will sink your EPA, your everything like this. The Patriots have to get Carolina out of those stack boxes because with Derek Brown against Ben Brown and facing 7 guys in the box, you're just not going to be able to move the ball. That will set up those play action shots, which is to say The battleground that should swing this war of a game on Sunday, I think, is the middle of the field, which means Hunter Henry. It means play action. It means how long you can win there, because you're not going to win outside with J.C. Horn. And I'm so curious to see how McDaniels gets them out of that, which normally requires taking deep shots. But if you hit enough on play action early, they just might go, hey, we got to play out of a too high structure and hope that maybe we can control the ground game with a lighter box, because it's just kind of suffocated their offense. They need to be able to get teams out of the same game plan they're seeing every single week. And that means winning the middle of the field where teams are already crowding to stop the run, but also to get a hold of your slot guys. You need to open that up a little bit, and that opens really the whole offense.
Yeah, it is funny, too, that you mentioned the 8-man box thing, because after you tweeted that, I was just looking at it from like an individual player perspective. And the two guys at the top of the list are the Seattle guys. And we saw it actually in the game on Thursday night. They actually started throwing to their running backs. So I wonder if that was a point of emphasis for Seattle in that game. And then you look who's next on the list. It's Krosky Merritt from Washington. The reason that's happening is because they have a running quarterback too, even if Mariota's in the game, right? J.K. Dobbins is next, who we know doesn't catch the ball. Derrick Henry's next after that for obvious reasons. David Montgomery, they don't throw it to him like they throw it to Gibbs. And then next on the list is Ramondre Stevenson. And the Patriots actually do throw the ball to Ramondre. So it speaks to the lack of threats on the outside. Like all these other guys on this list, you can justify why the team is doing it tactically. The reason, like, it's not like they won't throw the ball to Ramondre. Like a lot of those other guys, you won't throw the ball to. So it is more about, I feel like, the guys on the outside where they're like, okay, we're not worried about any of these guys. We don't even have to have safeties helping out in any situations because we're really not worried about any of the Patriots receivers. So I think that's what that stat is about the Patriots weapons more so than the Patriots running backs, because I do think, I mean, the running backs have been awful putting the ball on the ground. I mean, we've established that. The Patriots running backs can all catch the ball out of the backfield.
Yeah, they can. And again, I said Monday, there's nothing new to add on the Stevenson thing. I would just sit him, make him a healthy scratch. It's not to send a message to the rest of the team. It's just say, we can't afford this and you need a timeout. And I guess it is partly to send a message, but you're right. I mean, look, if you're not scared of giving up deep throws to receivers outside, you don't need to have safeties over the top of each side of the field. You just need one in the middle and then bring the other safety down. And that's what teams have been doing. All right. Before we get to the Patriots defense versus the Panthers offense, I got to remind the folks that on this show, we are red hot with our PrizePicks picks of the week. Last week, we had Drake Maye more than half a touchdown pass. Drake Maye's going to throw more than half a touchdown pass on Sundays. Okay. He did it in Miami. We told you he was going to do it. It happened. We told you Devon Achane would have more than 3.5 catches. He did. Last week, it was Calvin Austin to have more than 2.5. He had 3 on the touchdown. So we're 4-0 the last 2 weeks on our PrizePicks picks of the week. And I just told you a whole lot about Hunter Henry and how Carolina is the worst pass defense by DVOA against tight ends. Right now at PrizePicks, you can get Hunter Henry more than 2.5 catches. So right there, locking in our PrizePicks picks of the week, number 1. You can also get Ryan Fitzgerald, the Panthers kicker, more than half a field goal. Okay. You can tell that we're not doing the Drake Maye touchdown pass because they've taken it off the board wisely, because you and I and anyone else who's played has really capitalized on that. So the reason I'm going to send you to PrizePicks with those 2 picks, Hunter Henry more than 2.5 catches and Ryan Fitzgerald more than half a field goal. Patriots will get a stop. He'll kick a field goal. He's a very good kicker. Is because PrizePicks is the best place anywhere to win money watching sports. And you and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. So whether you listen to this podcast or you want to watch the MLB playoffs and you can pick baseball, or you can go basketball later with points, assists, home runs, yards, whatever it is, all you have to do at PrizePicks is build a lineup. I just gave you a lineup of 2 to 6 players. They all come with different stats. You can tweak them if you want, but then once you put them in your lineup, you go more or you go less. And that's it. You can take the lineup I just gave you, but only at PrizePicks. So download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineup. That's 50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Patriots defense, I mentioned 28th by DVOA. Their problems start really with the guy you mentioned right off the top. It's Ted McMillan, who said he's going to play. And this is a guy who has more than 100 yards next, or more than their next closest receiver. He's 6'4", he's 219, he's an athletic freak. I think you shadow him with Christian Gonzalez, maybe the entire game. What do you do?
Yeah, I would do the same thing. because he's the only guy you're even remotely worried about in this offense. Like, even if you look at the backs, it's not like you're worried about Hubbard. So, and the quarterback has not been particularly good either. I mean, we can get to that, but to me, if Christian Gonzalez is going to play like 100% of the snaps like you hope, then yeah, I would do the same thing. If you're bringing it back, I got to imagine that's why they were waiting so long, is they didn't want him on a pitch count. And I would say I'm not a doctor, but it probably would have been tough to bring him back even if he was ready 2 weeks ago against Miami. Like, coming back from a hamstring injury, you got to be real hydrated for that matchup. So that we're chasing around Tyreek Hill and Waddle. So I would do that. The other big thing that I would say, Callahan, in this game, before you just look at the ineptitude of the Panthers offense, can you just be ready for the start of the game? Because we've now had 2 games, the Raiders and last week against the Steelers, where the Steelers had issues all day moving the ball against the Patriots. I think that had a lot more to do about the Steelers than it did the Patriots. I just think Rodgers is completely washed at this particular point in time. I don't think their offensive line is good. Warren's good catching the ball to the backfield. I don't think he's a great back. But anyway, I digress. The Patriots right now in first quarter defense are 29th in EPA, and they're 31st in success rate, 59.1%. Nearly 60% of the plays against the Patriots in the first quarter have been successful. And this is what I go back to. Like, did they just not, because the Steelers weren't successful running the ball in the first 2 weeks, did they just think, hey, they're not going to try to run? And then they just gash them in the run game. And I put this on Vrabel more so than anybody else, right? Because Vrabel obviously is in an unfortunate situation, that Terrell Williams is dealing with his situation. But that means that Vrabel should be more involved, and I think he should be anyway, more involved with the defense than the offense. So why is the game planning, or why should I say, why is the other team's offense ready to go more so than your defense outside of the Miami game? Like Geno Smith, the opening drive just went right down the field. And if you look at that Steelers game, it took them forever to do anything after that. Right? Like, the Patriots completely controlled the game for the majority of that game. Like, time of possession, they dominated plays, they dominated all that stuff. So I would just like them to be ready to play. Like, is that too much to ask for?
No, of course not. And honestly, in retrospect, which I wield the hammer when I feel like I have to. I give you a pat on the back when I think you deserve it. But the game plans have not been good. And you could go to the results like you just did and rattle off all those stats. Your bottom 5 by success rate and EPA in the first quarter. You can't stop a nosebleed. The Raiders was a different issue than what we saw against Pittsburgh, because it was just, as it's been put multiple times, emotional blitzing, right? That 3rd and 11, dropping your 2 best pass rushers and saying, okay, go in coverage. Like, just don't do it. We don't need to talk about that play anymore. I've talked about it a lot. But the issue with Pittsburgh was they're starting out in 2 high shells, and maybe they believed they could stop the run with the light box. But Pittsburgh, you had to figure, knowing that Vrabel had Arthur Smith on his staff before, was going to try what any offensive coordinator would do, which is a lot of space plays. Let's get the ball to this receiver in space. Okay, let's get it to Calvin Austin. We're going to force you to tackle because through 2 weeks you've shown you stink at it. They did that for the first time with a bubble to DK Metcalf, who we know had one of the worst 3-cone times at the combine. He's not quick. You want him going side to side. But what happened was he caught the ball, had 2 blockers in front of him, and there was only 1 Patriot on that side because they were playing this 2 high shell. And I think this is a simple game plan where you need to force Bryce Young to beat you, throwing other places and to other people than Tet McMillan. And so I think when you play more single high, which was the adjustment they made against Pittsburgh, and that loaded the box and it brought more players over the middle of the field where they wanted to control, and they did, do that with Bryce Young. And it doesn't have to be exotic. It doesn't have to be complicated, but you need to do basic better. So basic includes Christian Gonzalez as a shadow. It includes not outthinking yourselves and outsmarting yourselves to give low-hanging fruit to the opponent, because they'll take it, and make sure Bryce Young stays in the pocket. But I don't know. It sounds simple. The other part about this is the Panthers have a backup center and right guard. So are you looking at this and saying, okay, Milton Williams, Christian Barmore go nuts? Or do you want to maybe put a little bit more pressure on, because as we just detailed, outside of McMillan, the Patriots should be able to man up whomever the Panthers have and blitz.
Yeah. Well, and Bryce Young just stinks, right? His passer rating's 30th. The Panthers offense is terrible in general, but I don't think you should have to heat them up. You just mentioned the backups in there. The Panthers are 24th in pass block win rate. And I feel like Milton Williams and Christian Barmore should just be able to dominate this game. Milton Williams is number 1 in ESPN's pass block or pass rush win rate. among all defensive linemen. Like, I think Milton Williams is awesome. And I think the Patriots defense, for the most part, and I think some of it, to your point, has been game planning and in-game decisions by the coaching staff that they've made. I think that has hurt them at times. I also think clearly having Alex Austin at times being your number 2 corner or Marcus Jones, that's been a big thing. So now Carlton Davis can take on the number 2 guy, which I think is big. For the most part, I know Davis gave up the touchdown to Metcalf. I thought he had a nice play in the opening game where I think he was on Bowers when he tipped that ball up for the interception. So I think as a number 2 corner, I'm very happy with Carlton Davis and get Christian Gonzalez back at the number 1. But this is a game that, from a talent perspective, the Patriots defense should dominate this game. So I don't really think you have to heat Bryce Young up. Like, I think the Patriots should just be able to play him straight up. And I know that sounds boring to say, but I think your guys up front are better than the Panthers offensive line. And I think you could really just aggravate this quarterback to begin with, because if Ted McMillan doesn't get open, who's getting open for the Panthers? They should be able to do this themselves. Like, they don't really need to be exotic with their looks against Bryce Young. I mean, I guess because Bryce Young's been so bad, you can try to confuse him, but if the Panthers are moving the ball successfully on the Patriots, you're in major trouble.
You are. And look, we can talk about Ted McMillan. We have a lot already, but we might as well mention some of the other guys that they have. And I just wanted to pull up the exact numbers. So when I tell you, Jatavion Sanders, an old friend, Hunter Renfrow, once projected by everyone to be future Patriot, White Sockeye out of Clemson, didn't happen. And Chuba Hubbard are their next 3 leading receivers. That's true. None of them have more than 92 yards. And Jatavion Sanders, their tight end, who has 11 catches, tied for second most on the team. Again, everything is behind McMillan. Didn't practice Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday. Don't think he's going to play. Same goes for Xavier Legette, who has been a disaster for them, and a guy that came back into the first round of draft a couple of years ago. So they're hurt. They're not that talented. I think Bryce Young's better just a little bit than those numbers indicate, because of game script and just, again, the things around him. You're losing 2 interior linemen for a guy who's short and needs those interior linemen to be better than most quarterbacks do. But it really is that simple. Play basic coverage, a lot of man. Give me some more cover 3, control the middle of the field, load the box. And Chuba Hubbard, who was limited Thursday, I would assume he's going to play, but he's clearly got a new injury. He was fine on Wednesday. His success rate's 51% on the ground. And he's got 168 yards, no touchdowns, but he's good enough to kind of tough out some good yards. Don't let him do that. Tackle on first contact, play good, basic, fundamental defense. And I don't see a way that the Patriots lose, even if this has to be a gross slugfest, because the Panthers defense plays better than we've given them credit for. And it's like 13-6 or 13-10. That's fine. Just do your part to hold them to 6 or 10 or at most 13. That's how I think this game should go.
Yeah. And I would say one other component, and this isn't just offense or defense, just look like the better coaching staff. All right, we thought this is this huge upgrade getting Mike Vrabel. Has there been moments where we thought the team looked better? Yeah, sure. But for the most part, it's been underwhelming what we've seen from Mike Vrabel through the first couple of weeks, even going back to week 1. And hopefully you're not in this situation. You're down 10 and you're punting with 4:53 left. I get it's a 4th and 10, but why would you be doing that in that situation? The thing I alluded to earlier with the defense, be ready to start these games, unlike what's been going on. Don't have all these careless penalties, because right now, like, your team, the appearance would be, if we just took away the name Mike Vrabel, your team is poorly coached. Like, if his name was not Mike Vrabel, we'd be saying this is a poorly coached football team right now. And I guess some people certainly are, but I don't know. Was this like an issue in Tennessee? Like, this team, the operation should be more buttoned up, because right now there's too much sloppiness. Because the thing is this, like, clearly from a talent perspective, the Patriots are significantly better than they were a year ago. I think the quarterback has been, like, he's got the unbelievable plays, and then he's got the 2 or 3 a game where you're like, how could you be so good and then make this poor decision? Like, dude, it's 14-14, right? You're driving, you're on the 33. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't try to extend the play, right? So there's those things, but he has so many highlight plays. I mean, the Ramondre pass in week 2 was incredible. Some of these runs where it's like, you see Rodgers can't run away from linemen anymore. You see Drake Maye just like casually pick up 16 yards on a rushing play where nothing's there, where he rolls out on these boots. But it's just the sloppiness, I think, has been the most surprising part of the season to me, has been the sloppy play from the team, because I think that's the one thing we thought would definitely improve under Vrabel, that this would look like a more professional outfit than it did under Gerard Mayo. And shockingly, that has not been the case.
And the issue for Gerard Mayo, of course, and this is the last we'll speak of last season, was that the team was at its best at the start, and it got worse throughout the year. So we have every reason to be upset, and fans especially. I mean, look, I'm going to show up and do my job regardless of how sloppy the team is. You can tell because I've done that the last 2 years, 3. But my point is, I believe they will get better. I believe that starts on Sunday. This is not to absolve or forgive anything that's happened the last 3 weeks, because you use the exact right word: sloppy. Penalties, missed tackles, bad turnovers, iffy special teams. Those are all hallmarks of bad football teams. Okay. The Patriots are 1-2 against teams that are about just as good as they are. Coin flip games. This is not a big issue, but you just look at them and go, you should have had one more. Whether it's the Raiders or Steelers, take your pick. You definitely should have Carolina. There is a path for the Panthers to win this. It would have to be a defensive game, and you scheme up a couple of scores offensively. I just don't think it's going to happen. So my game pick here, in a game that I think everyone's going to feel begrudgingly a little bit better about before they go to Buffalo, and then we're going to have a heck of a week next week. 20-10 Patriots. I think they get out to an early lead, and then water kind of finds its level with the offense versus Carolina defense matchup. And Derek Brown's just a problem, and J.C. Horn's a problem, and they kind of reassert control of the game. But the Panthers' offense is not enough to scare me whatsoever. Again, I think this is 20-10 Pats.
I have it 27-13, so obviously covering that 5.5. I think Bryce Young will throw you one, so you get like good field position or maybe even a pick six at one situation where it's like 20-13 midway through the third quarter, and the Patriots end up running away with the game late. But they're just so much more talented. I will give you this, just outside just like the game pick. You want a same game parlay for this one? I need to get back.
I will take one off the air. That's
okay.
We are loyal to our friends at PrizePicks who have been loyal to us, but I know you have a different arrangements over on Off the Pike. Speaking of Off the Pike, you're busier outside of Pats. Red Sox might clinch wild card spot today. I hope they do. I'll be in attendance. Celtics are not that far away. What else you got coming down the pike, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully next week we'll be plotting like 3 days in a row, late night after these Red Sox playoff games. But yeah, I'm nervous, man. But yeah, we'll be doing a ton of Celtics, doing a ton of Red Sox. It just felt like last night was the perfect opportunity to clinch. I was hoping maybe the Astros lose and the Red Sox, I mean, maybe they could start popping the champagne in the clubhouse before they even played against the Blue Jays. But
you don't want to do that at home, though? Like, I know it sounds selfish, and like no one listening to this cares that I'm going to the game tonight, but I'm just like,
yeah,
you want it. Like, it's going to be a playoff atmosphere at Fenway, and that might not happen if they lose enough games on the road in the first round. You know what I mean? Like, you'd love to have it locked up, don't get me wrong, but there's no way they get swept this weekend and the Astros have their own sweep to make this crazy comeback. Like, they're going to get in, and when they do, I'm glad it'll be at home.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is, like, this team looked – go back like a week and a half ago, we were so down on the Red Sox, the way they were playing. They weren't hitting since the Roman Anthony injury, and I know that it's kind of crazy saying this now. They were getting no hit for, 6 innings last night. They finally got a couple of hits later on after the game was basically over, but Romy Gonzalez has heated up. Yoshida is actually hitting, which is like a minor miracle at this point in time. Narvaez had some big hits in that Blue Jays series. Story has been good at the plate. He's in a defensive slump, if there is such a thing. 7 errors in a month. But the most disappointing thing to me to come out of Toronto was Giolito was horrible. He walked 4 guys. And Bayo, I felt like that was the biggest start of his career on Thursday night. And he goes out there and I'm like, oh yeah, he's working through these things. He gives you 5 scoreless, and then he comes out for the 5th inning and he has no command, right? Like he walked 3 guys in the game and he hit 2, including the 9-hitter. And he refuses to throw his changeup anymore, which we've said for like years is his best pitch. So I just okay, let's say they win one of these games. I hope for your sake it's tonight because you're going to be there. That'll be fun. I'll have it on Apple TV, which I'll find out every pitch, what the probability of the guy to get on base is. But anyway.
Can I stop you there for a second? Because this is all good Red Sox content. But I just tweeted this out the other day, furious at the gym, because all of the win probability stuff has taken over everything we consume about sports. And my particular tweet, which I sent a screenshot of the TV I was watching at the gym, was about college football. The Apple TV is the worst offender when it comes to this. In the corner, you're saying changing win probabilities. This is as if You are reading a murder mystery at home. And as you turn to every single page, it's telling you the likelihood that your favorite character is going to die at the end. Get out of my way. Get out of my life. I don't want to see any more percentages about what might happen, what could happen. You know what I know? Yes, things could happen. That's why I'm watching to find out. I don't need you to tell me the stakes of every single game as it relates to the playoffs or every single pitch as it relates to the at-bat. I understand what's happening because I've watched baseball before. I've watched college football before. I've read a murder mystery before. I don't need all of these chances of every little thing in real time. I know where this is going to go one way or another. Leave me be.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I don't know how I have no idea how they calculate it after every pitch. It's brutal. No, I totally justified. I was watching, I forget who they were. Was the Yankees? I was watching that game with my dad, and my dad couldn't stand it either. It's like, what does this even mean? What does this mean? Reach base probability? Is that on base percentage? I'm like, no, this is something different. But just the one other thing is like, if they get in, I would just like to feel confident about the game 2 starter. And it felt like for a large chunk of the season, we felt good about 3 of the Red Sox starters. And at this point, I only feel good about Crochet. Like right now, I think their second best starting pitcher is Early, who's had 3 career starts at the major league level. And the team was so desperate last week that they pitched the kid on 4 days rest. He hasn't done that since April in the minor leagues. Like that's how desperate the team had been from a pitching perspective. But you know what? Like I said that at the top of this pod about the Patriots, at least they're interesting. At least you're going to, like, at least this team, we're talking about them this late in September. I mean, it hasn't happened since 2021. I wish we had Roman Anthony to talk about, but hey, at least unless something crazy happens, we're going to get playoff baseball.
Amen. And I had no idea this podcast would end up in this place, like just win probabilities and watching games with your dad and me ranting about murder mystery novels, which, it's just to say, I think you're right. No one has complained or been more anti-Devers than me. Rage wrote a column about it. But it's time for complaining when your favorite team is in the playoffs or is about to be in the playoffs is over. It's time to celebrate. It's time to appreciate what that is. I don't think this has to be explained to any Patriots fan. You'd certainly be frustrated. This is a season of hope, and maybe they make the wild card, maybe they don't. Do they take a run? Do they win finally a big game or 2 in the regular season? Yeah, I think so. And right now it's frustrating, but as far as baseball goes, just got to appreciate it, man. Like we find out now as fans of the post glory days of 2000 to 2018, 19, what it's like when you're not hoisting a trophy every other year. Granted, the Celtics did last year, so I don't know. Anyway, he's Brian Barrett. You can listen to him on the Pats, the Sox, the Celtics, and Bruins. Get in there. Off the Pike podcast. No podcast better with the numbers and the raw data to tell you what's happening, even though you might not know it. Or even when you do, you get that little percentage there in the quarter you can just ignore. Thank you as always, man, for hopping on. Can't wait to have you on again.
Thanks, Callahan.